My ex-wife invited me to her wedding. Then, everything went wrong. Have you ever received a message so unexpected that it made you question everything you thought you had left behind? Imagine opening your phone on an ordinary Tuesday morning and seeing your ex-wife's name after 5 years of complete silence. Not just a text, not an apology, not an explanation, an invitation to her wedding. At first, I laughed. Then I noticed the handwritten note tucked inside the envelope. Please come. There's something you deserve to know before I marry him. I should have thrown it away. Every logical part of me screamed to ignore it. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew one thing. Emily never did anything without a reason. And what happened at that wedding destroyed more than one marriage. Before I tell you what happened, take 1 second to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Stories like this are inspired by real emotions and impossible choices, and your support helps us bring you a new story every week. Now, let me tell you how one wedding turned into the biggest secret of my life. 5 years earlier, Emily walked out of our apartment carrying 2 suitcases and 1 sentence. I can't do this anymore. No screaming, no broken dishes, no dramatic fight. Just those 6 words. I stood there holding the coffee mug she'd bought me for my birthday only 3 weeks earlier. By sunset, she was gone. The divorce happened quickly, almost too quickly. She didn't ask for much. She left me the apartment. She refused alimony. She even smiled during the final court hearing. That smile haunted me for years, because it wasn't the smile of someone who hated me. It looked more like someone saying goodbye forever. Friends kept telling me she had found another man. Maybe she had. Maybe she hadn't. Eventually, I stopped asking. Life moved on. Or at least, it pretended to. I buried myself in work. I became a project manager for a construction company in Chicago. Long hours, late nights, empty apartment. It was easier than thinking. Every birthday, every Christmas, every anniversary, I secretly wondered where Emily was. Then I reminded myself it didn't matter anymore. Until the invitation arrived. Cream-colored envelope, gold lettering, elegant, expensive, almost painfully beautiful. Emily Carter and Daniel Brooks request the honor of your presence. Daniel Brooks. I had never heard his name. The handwritten note fell onto my kitchen counter. Please don't say no. I need you there. No signature, no explanation, just those words. I read them 20 times. Then I made the biggest mistake, or maybe the best decision of my life. I RSVP'd yes. The wedding was held at a luxury vineyard nearly 2 hours outside the city. It looked like something from a magazine. White roses lined the entrance. Soft violin music floated through the air. Guests laughed beneath crystal lights hanging from ancient oak trees. Everyone looked happy, except Emily. I noticed it immediately. She smiled for photographs. She hugged relatives. She greeted friends. But every few minutes, her eyes searched the crowd. Searching, waiting, looking for someone. Me. The moment our eyes met, she froze. For half a second, everything around us disappeared. Then she forced another smile, a fake one. Exactly the kind of smile she wore the day she signed our divorce papers. A wedding coordinator approached me. "You must be Ethan." I nodded. "Emily asked me to give you this." Another envelope. Inside was a single card. "Wait until after the ceremony. Please trust me one last time." One last time? What did that even mean? I slipped the card into my jacket. Something wasn't right. Not even close. The groom finally arrived. Daniel Brooks. Tall, confident, perfect tailored suit, movie star smile. People loved him instantly. He shook hands with everyone, laughed loudly, bought drinks for strangers. If I hadn't known better, I would have liked him too. Then something strange happened. While greeting guests, Daniel looked directly at me. His smile disappeared, only for a second, just long enough to recognize me. Then it came back. But now, it looked forced, as if my presence made him uncomfortable. Interesting. Why? We had never met. Or had we? The ceremony began just before sunset. Emily walked down the aisle wearing a breathtaking white dress. People cried. Music played softly. She looked beautiful, but not happy. There's a difference. You can fake happiness. You can't fake peace. And Emily had none. The minister began speaking. Love, commitment, trust, forever. All the usual words. Daniel smiled proudly. Emily barely whispered her vows. Her hands trembled. Then, right before they exchanged rings, she looked at me. Not at Daniel, at me. And tears filled her eyes. A chill ran down my spine. What was happening? If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It tells YouTube you'd like to hear more emotional stories like this, and it truly helps our channel grow. Now, let's continue. The ceremony ended. Everyone applauded. The newlyweds kissed. Champagne corks exploded. Music became louder. People rushed toward the reception hall. I was about to leave. Whatever Emily wanted, she obviously wasn't going to tell me. Then someone grabbed my wrist. "Emily, don't go." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I need 10 minutes. I stared at her. "Emily, you're married." "I know." "Then what are you doing?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Please." There was fear in her eyes. Real fear. Not regret. Not guilt. Fear. I followed her toward an old wine cellar beneath the vineyard. The music faded behind us. The stone hallway felt cold despite the summer heat. She closed the heavy wooden door, locked it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she reached into her bouquet. Not her purse, not her dress, her bouquet. Hidden between the flowers was a small flash drive. She placed it into my hand. If anything happens to me, my heart skipped. "Give this to the police." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She shook her head. "I don't have much time." "What is this?" "It contains everything." "Everything about what?" She took a shaky breath. Daniel? Before I could ask another question, someone pounded on the cellar door. Hard. Emily's face turned pale. They're looking for me. They? She leaned closer. So are you. She kissed my cheek. Not romantically, like someone saying goodbye. Then she whispered 6 words that made my blood run cold. He knows why we divorced, Ethan. She unlocked the door, forced a smile, and walked back toward her wedding reception, leaving me alone in the darkness, holding a flash drive, and wondering whether I'd just become part of a secret someone was willing to kill to keep. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The tiny flash drive rested in my palm like it weighed 100 pounds. He knows why we divorced, Ethan. Those words echoed through my head. Why we divorced? There was no reason. At least, not one I had ever understood. Emily had simply walked away. No affair, no betrayal, no endless arguments. She had disappeared from my life without giving me a real explanation. So what did she mean? I shoved the flash drive into the inside pocket of my jacket just as the cellar door creaked open again. Emily? A man's voice drifted down the stone staircase. Daniel. Emily instantly stepped forward, wearing that perfect smile she'd practiced all.
There you are, Daniel laughed. Everyone's looking for the bride. He wrapped an arm around her waist. His smile looked warm. His eyes didn't. For a brief moment, he glanced at me. Not at my face, at my jacket.
Almost as if he knew exactly where the flash drive was. Everything okay? He asked. Emily answered before I could. Ethan was just congratulating us. Daniel extended his hand. So you're the famous ex-husband. I shook it. His grip tightened. Too tight. I've heard a lot about you. I can't say the same. He chuckled. That's probably for the best. His words sounded friendly. His eyes were making a threat. The reception hall exploded with music. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of guests. Servers carried silver trays covered with expensive food. People danced, laughed, raised glasses. From the outside, it looked like the perfect wedding. Inside, something felt terribly wrong. I noticed Emily watching the exits. Not once, not twice, constantly, as if she expected someone to walk through those doors at any second, or feared they already had. I also noticed something else. Daniel disappeared every 20 minutes, always for about 3 minutes, always returning through the same side hallway. No one else seemed to notice, except me. Curiosity won. The next time he slipped away, I followed him, keeping my distance. He walked past the kitchen, past the storage rooms, then outside behind the vineyard. Hidden behind a row of delivery trucks stood a black SUV. Its engine was running. Daniel leaned through the driver's window. Someone inside handed him a thick brown envelope. Cash? Documents? I couldn't tell. Before I could get closer, a hand landed on my shoulder. I nearly jumped. You shouldn't be here. It was an elderly waiter. Gray hair, deep wrinkles, kind eyes. He looked terrified. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. No. The old man lowered his voice. I know exactly who you are. My stomach tightened. You do? I worked at your wedding. What? 5 years ago. I stared at him, He nodded slowly. I remember your wife. What about her? The waiter glanced toward Daniel. She saved someone's life that day. My heart skipped. What are you talking about? Before he could answer, someone called his name from inside. He froze. They're watching. Who's watching? His voice became barely audible. The people Daniel works for. Works for? What people? The old waiter. He looked around nervously. If you care about Emily, he swallowed hard. Don't let her leave with him tonight. Then he hurried away, leaving me standing beside the vineyard, completely confused. I returned to the reception hall. Emily was giving speeches with Daniel's family. Everyone applauded. Daniel thanked his parents, his business partners, his friends. Then he looked directly at me. And I'd also like to thank Emily's past. The room laughed politely. Because without it, she wouldn't be standing here today. More laughter. Emily didn't laugh. Neither did I. Something about his words sounded calculated. Almost like he wanted me to know something. Dinner finally ended. Guests filled the dance floor. The band started playing old love songs. Emily quietly approached my table. Walk with me. We slipped outside without anyone noticing. The evening air was cool. The vineyard stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. Why did you really leave me? Emily closed her eyes. I've wanted to answer that question for 5 years. So answer it. She looked like she was fighting tears. You remember the accident? Immediately. I did. 5 years earlier, driving home after dinner, a truck had nearly hit us. Emily had insisted it was just a drunk driver. We'd forgotten about it within weeks. It wasn't an accident, she whispered. What? They were trying to kill you. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. Emily didn't smile. They had the wrong information. Who? She hesitated. I can't explain everything yet. You have to. They thought you had something. What? I didn't know then. And now? She nodded slowly. I do. Every answer created 3 new questions. So you divorced me? To keep you alive? The world seemed to stop. What? They told me if I disappeared from your life. Her voice cracked. They'd leave you alone. I couldn't breathe. No. I believed them. No. I thought if you hated me. Tears rolled down her face. You'd survive. 5 years. 5 years believing I wasn't enough. 5 years blaming myself. 5 years wondering what I'd done wrong. And all this time, she had been protecting me. I stepped backward. This can't be real. I wish it wasn't. Who are they? She looked toward the brightly lit reception hall, then quietly answered. Daniel isn't the man everyone thinks he is. Before I could ask another question, a loud crash echoed across the vineyard. Guests screamed. Glass shattered. Music stopped instantly. People rushed toward the ballroom, Emily's face turned white. No. She started running. I followed. Inside, chaos. One of the enormous crystal chandeliers had crashed onto the dance floor. Tables were overturned. Guests were crying. Several people were injured. The bride's parents stood frozen in shock. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. Neither was the flash drive. I instinctively reached inside my jacket. The pocket was empty. Cold panic shot through my body. Someone had taken it while I was talking to Emily.
She looked at me. Her face lost all color. Ethan? I slowly shook my head. It's gone. For the first time that night, Emily completely broke. No, she whispered. We're too late. And somewhere in the crowd, a man wearing a black suit smiled before disappearing through the emergency exit. Emily grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. Which pocket? The inside pocket. Are you sure? I checked twice. She closed her eyes. For one heartbreaking second, she looked less like a bride and more like the frightened woman I'd loved years ago. No, she whispered. They have it. Around us, people shouted for ambulances. Broken crystal covered the dance floor like shattered ice. Guests helped the injured while the wedding band stood frozen on the stage. Daniel suddenly appeared from the crowd. His tuxedo was dusty, but otherwise he looked perfectly fine. Almost too fine. He rushed toward Emily and wrapped his arms around her. Are you okay? She nodded weakly. I'm fine. He looked at me. You? I'm okay. His smile returned.
Thank goodness. That chandelier could have killed someone. Could have. Not should have. Not almost did. It sounded rehearsed. Then I noticed something else. His cuffs weren't dusty. His shoes weren't dusty. If he'd really been standing beneath that chandelier, he would have been covered in debris. Instead, he looked like a man who had known exactly where not to stand. Police officers and paramedics arrived within minutes. Guests were asked to remain inside until everyone had given a statement. An officer questioned me. Did you notice anything unusual before the chandelier fell? I looked toward Daniel. He was comforting Emily's mother, laughing softly, shaking hands with officers, playing the perfect groom. No, I finally answered. Not because I trusted Daniel, because I didn't know who else I could trust. Nearly an hour later, guests were slowly allowed to leave. The wedding reception had officially ended. No first dance, no cake cutting, no celebration. Just flashing red and blue lights outside the vineyard. As I walked toward the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan. It was the elderly waiter. He looked even more frightened than before. They've already searched your car. What? I saw two men. They didn't find anything. They weren't looking for your car. He glanced around nervously. They were making sure you were still alive. A chill ran down my spine. What do you know? The old man hesitated. Then he pulled a folded newspaper clipping from his pocket. This belongs to you. I unfolded it. My own photograph stared back at me. It had been taken outside my office 4 years ago. Across the top, someone had written in black marker, "Target confirmed." My blood turned cold. What is this? They've been following you for years. Who? I don't know their names. Then how do you know this? His face filled with regret. Because, he whispered, I used to work for them. Before I could ask another question, a gunshot echoed across the parking lot. The waiter staggered backward. For a split second, I didn't understand what had happened. Then I saw the blood spreading across his white shirt. He collapsed into my arms. People screamed. More shots rang out. Car alarms exploded everywhere. Get down! Someone shouted. I dropped behind a parked SUV, pulling the old man with me. He was struggling to breathe. His trembling hand grabbed my jacket. Listen. I'm calling an ambulance. No. He coughed violently. Listen. I leaned closer. They don't want money. What? They want? He gasped. The ledger. What ledger? His eyes searched mine desperately. Ask. Another cough. Your father. My father? My father died 11 years ago. The waiter slowly shook his head. No. Those were the last words he ever spoke. Police flooded the parking lot. The shooter had vanished. No weapon, no suspect, no witnesses who had seen anything clearly. Just another mystery. An officer asked if I knew the victim. I'd never met him before tonight. It wasn't entirely true. I'd met him. I just hadn't known him. Emily approached cautiously. She looked pale. What happened? He was shot. She stared at the body covered by a white sheet. They're getting closer. What does that mean? She looked around before speaking. We can't stay here. Emily, enough. She froze. No more half-truths. Ethan, no. My voice echoed through the nearly empty parking lot. You disappeared from my life. You let me believe I wasn't enough. You invite me to your wedding. You hand me a flash drive. Someone steals it. A man dies. And now you're still hiding something. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I was trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need the truth. She looked toward Daniel, who was speaking with detectives several yards away. When she turned back, she finally nodded. Okay. I'll tell you everything. We drove separately, not to a hotel, not to her house. Instead, Emily led me to a tiny lakeside cabin nearly 40 minutes from the vineyard. The place looked abandoned. No neighbors, no lights nearby. Just water, trees, silence. Inside, dust covered the furniture. She clearly hadn't been there in years. This was my grandfather's cabin. She locked the door, closed every curtain, checked every window. Only then did she sit across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "The man everyone knows as Daniel Brooks." She swallowed. Isn't Daniel Brooks. I stared at her. What? The real Daniel Brooks. died 6 years ago. I laughed in disbelief. No, it's true. The man I married tonight stole his identity. Every hair on my arm stood up. Who is he? I don't know his real name. Then why marry him? She looked down at the wedding ring on her finger. Slowly, she pulled it off. I never intended to stay married. What? I only needed to get close enough. Close enough to what? She opened an old wooden cabinet, reached behind it, and removed a thick leather notebook. It looked decades old. This, she said quietly, is the ledger. The ledger? The one they've been hunting for. I stared at it. You had it this whole time. She nodded. I've had it since the day we divorced. My mind raced. The flash drive was fake. What? It only contained family photographs. I blinked. You lied? I had to know if someone was watching us. They stole it. Exactly. She took a deep breath. Now I know Daniel never stopped watching. So this, I pointed at the notebook, is what they really want? She nodded. It contains names. What names? Judges, politicians, police officers, business executives, people who accepted money, people who disappeared, people who ordered murders. The room suddenly felt much smaller. How did your grandfather get this? Emily looked at the faded leather cover. He didn't. A tear rolled down her cheek. My father did. I frowned. I thought you said your father died years ago. He did. She met my eyes. But before he died, he left it with yours. The room fell completely silent. I could hear only the rain beginning outside. I slowly stood. My father? She nodded. That's why they came after you. They believed your father gave you the ledger before he died. He never did. I know. Then why follow me? Because they were never completely sure. I remembered the newspaper clipping, the surveillance, the mysterious truck years ago, the divorce, everything. It suddenly fit together. Every piece, every unanswered question, every sleepless night. Emily looked at me with exhausted eyes. They won't stop now. I looked down at the ancient notebook lying between us. Outside, headlights suddenly swept across the cabin windows. Not one vehicle, several. Engines shut off. Car doors slammed. Voices echoed through the trees. Emily's face turned white. They found us. She quietly blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed against the front door. Knock, knock, knock. A calm male voice spoke from outside. Ethan? My heart nearly stopped. It was Daniel, or whoever he really was. I know you're in there. Silence. Then he smiled through the door. You have something that belongs to me. Emily squeezed my hand in the darkness. Barely breathing, she whispered, Whatever happens, don't let him take the ledger. Outside, the doorknob slowly began to turn. The doorknob turned. Once, twice, then stopped. Whoever was outside knew the door was locked. A calm voice came through the wood. "Ethan, I'm not here to hurt you." I looked at Emily. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the biggest lie either of us had heard that night. Daniel continued. "I know Emily has told you terrible things about me." Neither of us answered. "I'd like the chance to tell you my side." Emily leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "Don't say a word." Outside, footsteps circled the cabin. Not one person. Several. I counted at least 4 different sets of boots crunching across the gravel. They were surrounding us. Then another voice spoke. "Back entrance secured." My stomach tightened. They had planned this. Daniel knocked again. 3 slow taps. "I'm going to count to 10. His voice remained perfectly calm. "Then we're coming in." 1, 2, 3. Emily grabbed the leather ledger from the table and shoved it into my hands. "Take it." "What about you?" "I'll distract them." "No, Ethan, I'm not leaving you." She stared at me for a second, then smiled. Not the fake smile she'd worn all evening. The real one. The one I'd fallen in love with years ago. "I always knew you'd say that." A loud crash interrupted us. The kitchen window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the floor. Someone had thrown a metal crowbar through it. Another crash. The back door splintered under a heavy kick. "They're inside!" someone shouted. Emily pointed toward a narrow staircase leading underground. "My grandfather built a storm cellar." We ran. Behind us, boots pounded across the wooden floor. Flashlights cut through the darkness. "Split up! Find the ledger! Don't let them escape!" The cellar smelled of damp earth and old wood. Emily slammed the heavy trapdoor shut behind us and dropped an iron bar into place. A second later, bang! Someone hit the door from above. Dust rained from the ceiling. Again, bang! The wood groaned. "They'll break through," I whispered. "I know." Emily knelt beside an old cabinet and pulled it away from the wall. Behind it was a narrow tunnel. I stared. "What is that?" "My grandfather's escape route." "You knew about this?" "I came here once after the divorce." "You never told me." "I wasn't supposed to." Another violent crash echoed overhead. The trapdoor cracked. "We're out of time." We crawled into the tunnel. It was barely high enough to move on our hands and knees. The air smelled of wet stone. Behind us came one final deafening crack. "They're through!" Flashlights swept into the cellar. "Hurry!" Emily whispered. We crawled faster. The tunnel seemed endless. Then, fresh air. We emerged behind a wall of thick bushes nearly 200 yards from the cabin. From there, we watched. Black SUVs surrounded the cabin. Men dressed in dark tactical clothing rushed inside. One of them carried a rifle. Another spoke into an earpiece. And standing calmly beside the vehicles was Daniel. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, as though he'd expected more from us. He pulled out his phone. A second later, my own phone vibrated. I stared at the screen. Unknown number. Emily shook her head violently. Don't answer. It kept ringing. Again. Again. Finally, I answered. Hello? Daniel sighed. I was hoping you'd make this easier. What do you want? You already know. The ledger? Very good. You'll never get it. A pause. Then he chuckled. I don't need the ledger. My heart skipped. What? I only need 1 page. I looked at Emily. She frowned. 1 page? Daniel continued. The rest is worthless. Emily whispered. He's lying. But something in her voice told me she wasn't completely sure. Daniel spoke again. I'll make you a deal. I'm not interested. You should be. I've spent 5 years protecting Emily. You think she sacrificed everything to save you. She did. Another pause. Then, no, Ethan. His voice became almost sympathetic. She wasn't protecting you. She was protecting someone else. I felt Emily stiffen beside me. Don't listen to him, she whispered. Daniel laughed. Ask her one question. Silence. Ask her whose blood was on the steering wheel after the truck tried to kill you. Every muscle in Emily's body froze. My heart began pounding. What is he talking about? Emily didn't answer. I looked at her. Emily? Still nothing. Answer me! Finally, very quietly, she said, I never wanted you to know. A cold wave washed over me. Know what? Tears filled her eyes. There was someone else in the car. My mind went blank. No. She nodded. There was. Who? She closed her eyes. Our daughter. Everything inside me stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I barely managed to whisper the word. Daughter? Emily broke down completely. I was 8 weeks pregnant. The world spun. I found out 2 days before the accident. I stared at her, unable to process a single thought. I wanted to surprise you. She covered her face. But after the truck, I realized they weren't just willing to kill you. They would have killed our baby too. I stepped backward. Pregnant? She had been pregnant? All those years, I had believed she simply stopped loving me. Instead, she had been carrying our child. A child I never even knew existed. What happened? I whispered. Emily looked at the ground. I lost the baby 3 days later. Silence. Only the wind moved through the trees. No words came. No anger. No tears. Just emptiness. 5 years. 5 years mourning a marriage without knowing I'd also lost a child. Daniel's voice came through the phone again. I told you she'd been hiding things. I slowly lifted the phone. If you knew, I know everything. How? Another small laugh. Because I was the man driving the truck. My vision blurred. Emily gasped. For the first time that night, Daniel's calm mask disappeared. His voice became cold, cruel. "You should have died that day, Ethan." Click. The call ended. For several long seconds,
neither of us moved. Then, from somewhere behind the trees, a flashlight beam swept across the darkness. "They're searching the woods," Emily whispered. I looked at the ledger in my hands, then back toward the lights. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't running because I wanted answers. I was running because now, this had become personal. For the first time that night, I wasn't afraid. I was furious. 5 years. 5 years believing my marriage had failed because I wasn't enough. 5 years wondering what I'd done wrong, when the truth was so much darker. Emily had lost our baby. She had sacrificed our marriage to keep me alive. And the man responsible had just admitted it himself. I slipped the phone into my pocket. "We're ending this tonight." Emily grabbed my arm. "No." I looked at her. "If you go after him now, you'll die. Maybe. Ethan!" "But if we keep running," I held up the ledger, "he'll never stop." She knew I was right. The question wasn't whether Daniel would come after us. It was how many more innocent people would get hurt before he did. The forest stretched for miles around us. Moonlight filtered through the trees, barely illuminating the narrow trail. Behind us, flashlights danced between the trunks. "They're splitting up!" someone shouted in the distance. "They can't be far!" Emily pointed toward an old fire tower standing above the tree line. "My grandfather used to keep a radio up there. Do you think it still works?" "I don't know." "It doesn't have to." "What do you mean?" I smiled for the first time all night. We don't need a radio. We need height. She frowned. Then she understood. "My phone." I nodded. "No signal down here. Maybe up there." We ran. By the time we reached the tower, my lungs were burning. The wooden staircase groaned beneath every step. 100 feet. 200. 300. Finally, the top platform. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar. Then 2. Emily stared hopefully. "Call the police." I shook my head. "Not yet." She looked confused. "What are you doing?" I opened the voice recorder, then pressed play. Daniel's confession echoed from the speaker. I was the man driving the truck. Emily's eyes widened. "When did you record that?" "The entire phone call." She covered her mouth. "You..." I guessed he'd say something he'd regret. She laughed through her tears. After everything we'd been through, it was the first genuine laugh either of us had shared. Of all of us had shared in years. I immediately dialed 911. Within minutes, state police confirmed they were already responding to the shooting at the vineyard. I told them everything. The cabin, the armed men, the confession, the ledger. The operator stayed calm. "Officers are on their way. Stay where you are." I looked into the darkness below. They already know where we are. As if on cue, headlights appeared through the trees. 1 SUV, then another, then a third. Daniel stepped out of the lead vehicle. Even from that distance, I could see him smiling. He looked up toward the tower, then raised a megaphone. "Ethan!" His voice echoed through the forest.
You've made this much harder than it needed to be. I didn't answer. You have 10 minutes. If the ledger isn't on the ground, everyone dies. Emily whispered, "He's bluffing." I watched the men unloading rifles from the SUVs. No, I don't think he is. The first shot shattered the silence. The bullet slammed into one of the tower's support beams. Wood splintered. Another shot, then another. "They're trying to bring it down," Emily shouted. The entire structure shook. I looked at the ladder. Too exposed. If we climbed down now, we'd never make it. Then, I noticed something attached to the tower. An emergency maintenance cable. A steel zip line used decades earlier to transport equipment down the hillside. It disappeared into the darkness. Emily followed my gaze. Does it still work? There wasn't time to find out. Below us, Daniel raised the megaphone again. 5 minutes. I wrapped my jacket around the cable. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't safe. But it was our only chance. I looked at Emily. "Ready?" She smiled nervously. "When have we ever done anything the easy way?" I laughed. "Even now." Then we jumped. The cable screamed under our weight. Wind whipped past our faces. Behind us, gunfire erupted. The tower disappeared into the darkness as we raced downhill. Seconds later, deafening crash echoed through the forest. The tower collapsed. Daniel had destroyed it, but we were already gone. We landed hard near an abandoned service road. Bruised, bleeding, alive. The sound of sirens filled the night. Not one, dozens. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees from every direction. Daniel's men scattered instantly. Several fled into the woods. Others jumped into their vehicles. Police SUVs blocked both ends of the road. "Federal agents! Lose the weapons! Hands where we can see them!" Chaos exploded. Gunfire lasted less than 30 seconds. Then, silence. Daniel sprinted toward the forest. I saw him first. "Emily!" She looked. Without thinking, we ran after him. He wasn't getting away again. Daniel burst onto an old wooden bridge crossing a narrow river. Halfway across, he turned. The charming smile was gone forever. His face was twisted with rage. "You ruined everything!" "No," I said. "You did." He laughed bitterly. "You think this changes anything? It changes enough." I held up my phone. "The police have your confession." His expression changed. For the first time, fear. Real fear. "You recorded me." I did. He raised a pistol. Emily stepped in front of me. "No!" The gun fired. Time slowed. Emily stumbled. I caught her before she hit the bridge. "No." She looked up at me, then smiled. "I'm okay." The bullet had grazed her shoulder. Before Daniel could fire again, a voice thundered behind us. "Drop the weapon!" Federal agents surrounded both ends of the bridge. Daniel looked left, right, nowhere to run. For 1 second, he considered firing. Instead, he slowly lowered the gun. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. It was over. 6 months later, the investigation made international headlines. The leather ledger exposed a criminal network that had operated for decades. Corrupt officials, businessmen, organized crime. More than 60 people were arrested. The waiter who died protecting us was honored posthumously. His family finally learned the truth about the man he had become in his final years. As for Daniel, his real name wasn't Daniel Brooks. It wasn't even close. He was sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. He would never walk free again. Emily and I didn't rush back into our old lives. Too much had happened. Too much had been broken. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes years. We started slowly. Coffee once a week, long conversations, therapy, learning to trust each other again. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after the wedding that never truly happened, we returned to the small cemetery where our unborn daughter had been buried. Emily placed a single white rose on the tiny stone. I stood beside her in silence. We cried together for the child we'd never had the chance to meet, for the years we'd lost, for the family that had been stolen from us. When we turned to leave, Emily quietly slipped her hand into mine. This time, neither of us let go. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's this. The truth has a strange way of finding the light. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it costs more than we ever imagined. But no lie, no matter how carefully hidden, can stay buried forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. New emotional stories with shocking twists are released every week, and we'd love to have you with us for the next one. Until then, take care of the people you love, because sometimes the words left unsaid become the heaviest burden of all. The end.